on-street prostitution. The genesis of the operation, I suppose, historically, from the North Central or from a specific area in Dublin North Central, there's been a cultural attachment, I suppose, to on-street prostitution going back to the 1700s. So it was very culturally ingrained in both the area and in the people that were involved in it. I suppose from the recent regeneration of the Smithfield area and some of the North Central area, the effect on the on-street prostitution is that it displaced it from traditional areas and into more residential areas. Obviously, this caused a lot of concern in relation to the local communities, and that was the primary driver for this operation, in that women and teenage girls going about their day-to-day business, going to work, coming from college or school, were being accosted by men seeking sex. Obviously, the driver for this was obviously the local community themselves and the local politicians and our local Garda management through the JPCs that this issue had to be addressed. And I was tasked by the Chief Superintendent of North Central to put a plan in place to address it. I suppose we knew that it had to be a holistic approach, in that it wasn't primarily a Garda focused solution, that there was other stakeholders that had to be engaged with to provide an overall solution to the problem. Previous initiatives, just focusing from a Garda point of view, hadn't been as successful as we had hoped they would have been. And again, obviously, the multi-agency approach, and I'll be talking a bit about our partners later on in relation to that, it had to be a partnership approach, not different agencies working in isolation, but all the agencies working together towards the achievement of a common goal. And that's the genesis of how Operation Curb was developed. The primary goal, I suppose, was to increase the quality of life for the residents that were living in areas that were affected by on-street prostitution and the women that were being accosted going about their daily business. One of the main goals was obviously to identify the hotspots and the offenders, because, as I said previously, there had been some displacement in relation to, as a result of the regeneration, so we really had to kind of, rather than relying on anecdotal evidence, we had to positively identify the specific areas that this was occurring in. Again, there was a zero approach in relation to those that were soliciting others for sex, so there was a prosecution policy in relation to that. Again, realising, I suppose, that just prosecuting the offenders wasn't the full solution to the problem. Obviously, we were interested in diverting the women that were involved in street-based prostitution towards alternative lifestyle choices. And again, from a neighbourhood policing perspective, obviously the communication of the Garda action back into the communities in relation to how successful they felt the programme was and what successes and goals we were achieving. That's just the kind of a more distilled version of the diverting women towards alternative lifestyle choices. Obviously, it was important to identify the women that were involved in the on-street prostitution, and to develop up a detailed profile of all these women in relation to the reason why they were involved in street prostitution, the different profiles of them, the locations, their ages, their addresses, so that give us a kind of a very clear handle in relation to the women that were involved in it. Engaging with the external organisations was a critical factor for us, and one of the measures for that was the number of stakeholders that we did engage with to succeed in the prosecution, or succeed in the operation. We developed up specific information packs that we would distribute to the women that we came across that were involved in prostitution. The Bridewell is a central holding area as well in Dublin, so there was a large amount. Any women prisoners that were coming through the Bridewell area were also given information packs if they were identified as being involved in prostitution throughout the city. These are our main partners in relation to ourselves, Ruhama and the National Court, or the Court Services. The Court Services were very helpful to us in relation to the prosecution of offenders. They would put aside a specific day in court that all the people that were arrested would appear on that specific date. We had a specific judge then that would deal with the offenders, and that provided a continuity of sentencing and a continuity of an overall report from a district justice point of view as to the exact problem. I suppose the helpful side effect, I suppose, was that a lot of the fines that were imposed in relation to offenders were diverted back towards Ruhama as well, so there was a good interaction there. I suppose from a management point of view, the way we approached it was that female officers would patrol the area dressed in normal attire, and when they were accosted then by people seeking sexual services, they were arrested. So it was quite a comprehensive plan, and when you think of just to have one female officer patrolling in plain clothes, she had to be supported by 5 or 6 other operational police officers, because obviously there was an element of risk involved in it. I suppose one of the things that gave us an idea as to the challenges and the risks that are facing women that are involved in on-street prostitution. So there's a large risk mitigation process in place to protect our own officers. Obviously, everyone that was going on the operation was fully briefed in relation to their roles and responsibilities, and a full debrief afterwards, which fed into the operational plan. This is the referral process that we put in place for the women. Obviously, the initial contact, either if they were arrested, through Operation Kerb or arrested and passing through the Bridal Station, they were given information packs. A female officer would sit down with them, go through the alternatives that are available, the services that are available to us, and our partnership with Ruhama. And then any other interactions, particularly in relation to the female officers that were out and about on the ground, if they came across women that were involved in on-street prostitution, by talking to them, working through the different options for them, and again giving them the information pack and referring them on to Ruhama. Obviously, the referral had to be voluntary. There was data protection issues in that passing information along, so it had to be a voluntary referral, or they could be referred through the courts. In some instances where women were arrested and charged before the courts, long remand periods were given to those people so that they could engage with the different services, and the justices were of a mind then to give them Probation Act in relation to any offences. The result is obviously they could either enter the programme or seek other supports. Obviously, some of the women that were involved would have drug problems, would have financial problems, so there's other supports or housing problems that they might need. Again, this is some of the results that we've had over the period. 77 men have been arrested for solicitation in the area. There was 3 females arrested. They were arrested at the very early stages of the operation under public order offences. At the moment, we have a 100% conviction rate, so we have 80 convictions, and all the 77 men were done. I suppose the success for us, is the number of women that have been diverted into Ruhama in relation to seeking their support or help, which is 7, which is probably about 30% of the women that were involved in this particular area in prostitution. And then a number of women have entered into full Ruhama programmes. I suppose as a result of our partnership with Ruhama, they agreed to do a review from their perspective of how successful the programme was. And the 2 of the things that came out for us was there was a greater willingness for the women engaged in on-street prostitution to engage with the Gardaí. And that greater willingness then obviously led on to them being able to report or any crimes that were committed against them, either assaults. So that was a good side issue for ourselves. Obviously, the Kerb itself, and I suppose the generation of media interest has fed back into the success of the operation as well, because now knowing that there is an operation in place, the likelihood that if you're going to the north central area of Dublin and you're soliciting, that the probability is that you will be arrested and convicted. So the national papers and local papers and radio communication as well. One of the things, it was a community-driven initiative. So we did a community-based survey as to how successful the community felt this initiative was. And it came back as astoundingly positive in relation to the whole operation, that it had reduced the level of on-street prostitution. There has been a noticeable reduction in the presence of buyers in the area. Initially, when we started the operation, we were probably arresting 5 or 6 individuals per operation, whereas the last 4 times we ran the operation, we've only arrested 2 people. So the number of buyers has drastically decreased in the area. And we've very positive feedback from both local and national politicians in relation to the operation itself. So that's just a quick overview of the Operation Kerb itself. Thank you.